Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your gracious host and guide along the way. In episode 24, we started a journey of exploration. Each episode or leg of this journey builds on the previous one. So, if you're just joining us, then why don't you just go back to episode 24 and catch up with us. I'll wait for you here. And for the rest of you, it's good to have your company for the next leg. Now, last episode we talked about the question that we're asking ourselves is, what is the way of the showman? And we looked at that from a few points of view. The starting point, I would say, is that the way of the showman is a way to make a living, but also a way to make a life, or in the pursuit of the particular type of living, which comes from being a performer or a showman or an artist. We spend that living that comes with a particular life. Sometimes we might discover that the choices that we have taken, that are implicit in this lifestyle, like the fact that we have to tour around, that might later on, if you get children and a family, come back and in a transformed way, not as a positive thing. So the positive things in the beginning might turn into something else later. And this is, of course, stuff that I have been thinking about because I have been in this game for a long time. And the way of the showman is, in many ways, my way of preparing people for some of these things that we inevitably will encounter if we are serious about being performers. If you're in this and you're in it for the long haul and you're in it for the long game, then these are things that would be beneficial to contemplate. To get at the core of this, we looked a little bit at what showmanship actually is, what is presented. And to get at that, I spoke of what I call the two geographies: the geography of the inner experience and the geography of the outer experience. And the inner experience is the thoughts and emotions and the stuff that goes on inside us, and the outer geography is the outer geography, where things have extension and you can measure and weigh them. It's trees and dogs and people wearing those funny hats at festivals with dreadlocks sewn into them, all of that stuff that's going on out there in the world. It's a weird world, and in that I was talking about how what is being presented at the very core of what's being presented in shows, it's us, it's human beings. And once we'd sort of set up these two geographies, which are, of course, it's all just one thing, or it's a myriad of things. A human being is so unbelievably complex that it's hard to get a grasp on it. So we're making maps here of this journey that we're on. We're in this exploration, and the map is a map is a simplification of the territory. The map is not the territory, it's a simplification of it that allows you to see better things and to navigate, not better things, to see bigger things. A map allows you to see bigger patterns by moving up into another scale, and that's what we're trying to do. And by talking about these two different geographies, the inner experience and the outer experience, which of course the audience has an inner and an outer experience, and so do we. And in ourselves, I talk then about the intersection between the inner and the outer geographies. That is I call that the midway. And that goes back to the American use of the word midway, meaning a carnival. So there we are at the heart of the carnival. So along this midway is in a sense, that's the way of the showman. It's the midway between our inner self and the outer, or the inner geography and the outer geography, and it's also the midway between us and our audience, or as we kind of looked at a little bit, it's the midway between the world and a human being. So it could be anything really. So that really was where we kind of left it off, that what's on show in a show is the human being. With that, let's move and get ourselves out onto the next leg of the journey. ShowMan, our way's trailhead. To me, the word showman itself offers a brilliant trailhead pointing to both of these geographies, the inner and the outer geography. As we explore this word and its use as a symbol, you will understand my reluctance to seek a non-gendered substitute. Even though I am using this in this new non-gendered way, I find a word so valuable that I've stuck with it. And this is what we're talking about today, one of these reasons. Because the words like a performer or entertainer, it doesn't really carry in it the revelatory potential that I see and find in the word showman. The word showman functions as one of those road signs with many arrows pointing in different directions, big in cartoons and stuff. And usually I see it on trails, like when I'm going for walks here in Norway. You might be quite far out into a forest or something along a trail, and all of a sudden comes one of those sticks, and on it has all these different arrows pointing in different directions, maybe with some numbers after saying here up to this or that lake or this or that walk, and behind it a little number that says how many kilometers it would be. The word showman has two arrows, show and man. One pointing towards the outer geography and one towards the inner. Inner and outer is such an obvious dichotomy that it might appear inane, but let's keep this seemingly simple polarity in our minds, and with a contemplative attitude, let's try to slowly unpack what lies in this organic complexity. Because the show part of the word, because showman is a composite word put together by the words show and man, and the show part of this word refers to the part of the showman which is for the world to see. That's what it's pointing at. It's what's being presented. Show points to the external facades of materialized expressions of a showman. It's our shows, our skills, and all their expressions in the outer geography, in the real world. It's the side of us that the world sees. It's the part of us that we put on show in life as well as in performances. The self we present in everyday life, as Goffman might have said it. The word man, meaning human, the word man is an arrow pointing to the inner human experience, which is where the seeds of what's being presented originates. It is our imagination, our thoughts, and our feelings which guides us as we create our acts and plan our shows, and as we act in the world. It points to the inner wellspring of creativity in us, not just as artists, but also of who we are as people. A huge part of who we are comes from ourselves, from our genes, and the very particular way that we are put together as a blend of our mother and father's biology. And the person we end up becoming is the result of the interactions between our inner and outer geographies. What we are given from birth and what the environment gives us from that we are put into. We are the midway, the outer and the inner, the show and the man. We are show man, show folk, show people. show human beings. So looking a little bit more at the word show and man as words, to see what we can pass out. The word show can be a verb or a noun. As a verb, to show means to let be seen, to put in sight, or to make known. As a noun, it is the fulcrum upon which our craft pivots, the kind of shows we perform for people, the kind of showing, A show is defined as putting something on display in an exhibition, or as to put on show. So it is both what we do shows, but it's also in the shows we show things. It can also be used to describe a sort of outward appearance of a feeling, as in you can show emotion, or you can display a show of affection. And this last one can also, in a way, have a more sort of false counterpart if our display reflects a false impression. Like if your enemy hurts themselves, then you put on a show of compassion whilst inwardly rejoicing. The relevant meaning of the word man for our purposes is not the gendered variant of male, but of a human being in general, regardless of sex, as in mankind, humankind, or human being. So right off the bat, we are dealing with a word, with a phenomena, with a being which is infinitely harder to define than the uncontroversial definition of showing. Human being or mankind is an enormous concept, the definition of which brings in all aspects of human behavior, our relations to other animals, to ourselves, and our place in the world. A human is distinct from gods, animals, and machines. You might also argue that at least we're related to the gods, and we are certainly related to the animals, and arguments have certainly been made, even if I find it a little tenuous, that there are aspects of machines in us as well. But in general, human being is a concept which raises more questions than answers. In a very real sense, it's mysterious. Being human might seem straightforward, but with any examination it reveals itself quite unfathomable. The only way to make any sense of what it is to be human is to adopt a point of view, to make some claims, take a standpoint, and to stake out a role or territory from where to begin the asking of questions and seeking of answers and the puzzling together of connections. When trying to answer what it is to be human, it makes me think of St. Augustine's answer when he was asked, what is time? And he answered, I know what it is, but when you ask me, I don't. And how often don't we have this when you think you know something, and think it's actually quite easy to... you don't think that how complex it might be. It's often what happens when, if you have a child, for instance, and they ask you, so why is the sky blue, or all these things that kids ask you. It's all of a sudden you find yourself, oh, hang on a second, this is actually really complicated. And then to make any sense of it, you also need to be able to explain it in a way that makes sense to them. So as soon as you start going, oh, well, it's got to do with the infraction of light and the way that light hits the atmosphere, and their eyes glaze over, and you go, this is not interesting. This is not the answer I was looking for. But going back to St. Augustine's answer when he says, I guess it comes up with what is life, what is showmanship. Or it's like, I know what it is, but when you ask me, I don't. And this answer will follow us along the way as we explore things we think we know, but when we look closer, they turn out to be richer, more complex, and harder to grasp than we might first have thought. And looking at these two composite words, show and man, they are kind of pointing in two directions. When I look at the two words making up showman, I see each of them as a separate arrow on the same sign. To show is pointing outwards, with its active, emitting, presenting nature, and man, on the other hand, points inwards, indicating a questioning, experiential, existential direction. One is about exposition, and the other is about introspection. One is about being seen, and the other about what and who is on show. But in saying this, we must keep in mind that each of the arrows are part of the same sign, or the same word, show, man, and the same sign has the two arrows. They're two aspects of a whole. Each one is distinct, yet not separate from the other. Each is reflected in the mirror image of the other, inverse and altered, yet not wholly separate. This folk psychological distinction of inner and outer is a polarity we will return to a lot along the way, and look at it from many angles. But for a starter, there is not just the inside and outside of the showman, there is also an inside and outside to the audience, as I mentioned in the introduction. The inwards directionality of the man, the sort of man, the man part of showman, or this arrow, is perhaps a little less intuitive than the outwardness of show, which is, a show is almost, seems to me very easy to see that link, that it's about the externality. It's the fabulous facades at the front of the sideshow. So let's elaborate on this inwardness of the word man for a moment. Man, or mankind, human, is so full of possible meanings and interpretations that it refuses any simple definition. Most of all, it begs more questions. And this inherent questioning, when approached in a fruitful manner, gives rise to wonder. The sense of wonder and this unstoppable tendency to question is the wellspring of pretty much all the separate quests for answers that humans seek, be it philosophy, psychology, science, culture, or art and entertainment. In the word man, in the word human, signified by the word man from showman, I see wondering about our wanderings along the way. Where do we come from? Who are we? And where are we going? And why? And what does it all mean? Unlike all the other animals who come into the world with quite specific instructions as to how to live their lives, human beings arrive rather open-ended. The mole, for instance, has shovels for hands. It digs tunnels, eats, shits, finds a mate, and procreates. I doubt it spends much time wondering what it's all about. This is a fact I'd say the mole shares with the entire animal kingdom. At first glance we might look at a dog and think their existence to be free from all our human hang-ups, but dogs are restricted by their biological instincts and inclinations as well. Their ability to consider their options and choose a whole other way of interacting with the world, or presenting themselves, or realizing their untapped potential, I think is close to non-existent. They are what they are. Like the existential philosopher Popeye the Sailor said, "I am what I am, and that's all what I am." I think that when we're having a tough time and look at dogs running and playing in the park, what we envy is not so much their freedom, but how unself-conscious they are. They aren't worrying and fretting, embarrassed in the self-reflective experience which is so normal for us humans. We envy how completely they are engaged in all they do. When they play, and when they beg, they beg. When they're tired, they sleep. They get on with their lives, satisfied that when they eat, sleep, copulate, and fight for the right to do these things, there's not much more to worry about. Not because they are happy to settle for less, but because that stuff truly and fully engages them, And in some significant sense, I think it also satisfies them. They're just so present when you go, "How are you good? Are you good?" You go to the dog, they are like, "Okay, it's you, it's me, we are here, we are looking at each other." Fully engaged, I think. Anyway, I could, of course, be wrong about an armadillo's ability to experience ennui, but what I lose in specificity and accuracy might be won back in the explanatory power of the simplification. Because, of course, animal consciousness and all this is an enormous topic, and the details of that, I think, lies a little bit outside the scope of what we're doing here. Because as much as we might long to not scrutinize ourselves, it is this ability of self-reflection which also lets us experience awe and wonder when encountering the world, which is a key component for the human ability to think and relate to the world. With our self-conscious open-endedness, I think we are a new mode of being in nature. I guess it's one of those things that, if I had to point out some things that separates us from the animals, it's this inclination and possibility. We contain the riddle of existence in us, but also we contain the solution. We are of the world, natural beings, yet we can't be explained fully through nature. Human culture being but one example of something which has transcended the strict laws of physics and also the strict laws of natural selection in biology. Much like how biology itself arises from physics, yet it is not reducible to physics. It doesn't make any sense to be talking about the movement of molecules when we talk about when we decide which show to watch on Netflix or whatever. There's something else going on there. When we describe what life is and what living things do, Newton's laws of motion are not adequate. No variety of life enshrines this more than the human being, with its extraordinary ability for being awake in the universe. The human being becomes a rebel, ceaseless in her refusal to conform to any simple category. Our human protest is realized in living creatively. Because human beings are shape-shifters. Human beings arrive not just unfinished and searching, but also with the ability to reshape ourselves, to represent ourselves in new ways. We all go through life as possibly the only being in the animal kingdom with this ability to change and be many things throughout our lives. We are animals, but we are a very specific animal, and I think our lack of specialization is our specialization. Our ability to adapt and change are our shovel hands, like on the mole. It is rare and possibly unhealthy to refuse change for a human being. As the world with its many impressions and experiences fill us, we might find ourselves change. We might find ourselves changing. As each decade appears in our hind view mirror, we find ourselves with a different view on the world, our consciousness altered. One way we know that we have changed is by asking, is that all there is? About passions, things, and processes which previously had the ability to wholeheartedly fulfill us. We are an onwards moving species, and we look always for something more. We question what's next? What's behind that hill? Oh, I wonder if the grass is greener over there. We get bored. And boredom is something which I am coming to believe is a real player in our evolutionary drive. I don't think a spider gets bored sitting in its web waiting. I think it's completely fulfilled, just waiting for the next fly to be caught in its net. It's like, okay, here I am. I'm waiting. And I'm waiting. And that somehow, I think that just fully engages it. This is pure speculation on my behalf. I haven't been able to have a decent conversation with a spider. Mankind wants to know who we are. only to find that when we think we have found an answer that satisfies our curiosity, time passes, and from the shadows of our inner geography comes once again to decide to ask that same question again. Is that all there is? I wonder. And this, of course, brings this glorious song. Is that all there is? Is that all there is to the circus? Is that all there is to a fire? Camille O'Sullivan sung that song to open La Clique, a show I toured with for 12 years, and for the first, 4 years or something of that, she opened the show with that song, so I came on soon after her, so I was always standing there listening to her, and I have glorious memories of standing at different venues, sometimes outside the Spiegel tent, and sometimes remember in Montreal I was standing in the Museum of Just for Laughs and standing out looking at a hotel on the other side wall while she's going on and waiting to go on. Beautiful memories. Is that all there is? Oh no, things keep changing and evolving. So, in the mystery traditions, the inner and the outer aspect to life, the universe and everything, was described by these fancier names or terms called esoteric and exoteric. And perhaps ironically, the meaning of esoteric might be the most well-known of these words today. Esoteric means something which is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. It comes from the Greek esotero, meaning more within. Esoteric, in that way, could be seen as meaning there's more within. The esoteric pertains to these inner things, the secret, enigmatic, and clandestine. In our show word symbology, the esoteric points to the metaphorical backstage, the real world hidden behind the banner lines and facades of fun. It is related to the secret techniques and tools of the trade and the inner world of the showman. It's more about the inner life and discoveries, the source of ourselves, ourself as well, our source of for authenticity, and it's more about things like our passions, the wellspring of our creativity, or where our ideas come from. It is the hundreds of hours of creative work that went into making the clown act look chaotic and frivolous. The esoteric connects to the questions that arises from the word man. It's like synonymous in a sense. In the esoteric we find terms like soul bandied about in the esoteric tradition, like the Western esotericism. In the interior domain, this kind of sacred and poetic language of soul, this is the native tongue in here. And it is in the esoteric that we find the heart being not just a pump, but the most beautiful castle in existence, the one which the child in the fairy tale seeks in the wild blue yonder. Now, the Google definition of exoteric is intended for or likely to be understood by the general public. The word's root comes from the Greek exoterikos. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. My Greek is not so good. But exoterikos means pertaining to the outside, the exterior, or the external. And for a showman, the exoteric is his acts, shows, and the material. It's the fruits and commodities of the craft. In show symbolic terms, it's the flapping, brightly lit sideshow banners out the front of the canvas tent. It's the show itself, with gags and fancy presentations. It's the shiny surfaces and the gaudy facades of fun intended for the crowds of townies and general public. It is the costumes, the collars, it's the frivolous and random-looking act of a clown from the crowd's point of view. It's the appearance of chaos in the well-practiced slapstick act. It's the facade of illusion. It's what we show. It's our act. It's the side of our art intended to be seen by the audience and the world. So the exoteric and the esoteric are two sides of the same coin, aspects of us and the world, in a continual dance of show and man, always swapping and flipping on who's in the lead. This stance, the meeting between the two, is where we discover our path along the way. It is in the convergence between these two that we find our material and how to present it. This is the midway. Paying attention to these two aspects of existence enables a different conversation. It grants access to a frontier which many performers aren't conscious of. In a similar way to how a show is a conversation between a showman and an audience, we discover that the show/man, the showman himself, is an ongoing conversation. As we explore the meaning of the two words separately, it's good just to remember that we have pried them from a whole. There's always this whole and detail. They are details from a whole. They're two aspects of the same thing. And whenever two of anything meets, there is room for dialogue. So when there are two, there is also the coming together of the two, the dialogue between the two. So, 2 is 3. In the meeting of two, something more, a field of tension appears. In this field we find growth through connections. Through our exploration of the words separately, we learn more about the details, which again changes the whole. This is what they fancy call the hermeneutic circle. In other words, by studying show and man separately, it expands our scope of showman. So, we are, in a sense, this way that we're walking now is a mapping of two geographies. The inner and the outer geography has their own vast landscapes to be explored, each one of them. As we add experiences and discoveries from our outer and inner explorations to our lives, we capture them in our memories and memory aids like notebooks and photographs or filmed on our phone. We also keep them in our bodies as skills and abilities, from sitting and walking to reading and juggling. These experiences and discoveries, ideas, emotions and actions we had in the two landscapes become our personal lived and living maps of the two geographies. They are creative maps, interlinked yet separate. These maps are not really something others can show you. You are your own map. Others can tell you about something, but that's not the same as experiencing it. It's a case of you really had to be there. You know, when somebody tells you about a fire, the most essential part, the warmth and the light, can't be properly conveyed. A fire or a show or life itself is a felt and lived experience. You really have to be there to get the full effect. A friend can tell you how much she loves Paris. And that's talking about Julie there, I guess. But only when you go there yourself and spend enough time to connect with the place can you fully place it onto your personal map of your own exoteric geography. This intersecting, coming together of the two realities, yours and your friends', will be different even if you stay at the same apartment with just the same views and ate at just the same boulangerie and chocolaterie. A quick visit to a place creates a light impression. A longer visit deepens the connections and impressions. Although if the quick visit to the city of love is accompanied by a new lover and it's an intense romantic explosion, the emotions, desires and feelings from even a short visit will be so powerful the impressions of the town will seem super strong and relevant. In this case, though, most of what you saw was probably the inside of your hotel bedroom and the face of or other body parts belonging to your lover. Our personal map of the outer world does not just contain places and people. They're not merely objective descriptions. The places and cultural phenomena that makes up our map of the world of the outer world are colored by our inner geographies, which is made up of our feelings and our thoughts and the things we want to do or have already done. Paris is very much shaped by our own inner connections to it, and then our embodied behaviors in it, what we did and how we were out walked and all this, as well as it's also connected to everything that we've read and been told about it. If you are in Paris and you've found your way to the Café de Deux Moulins pour Montmartre, your experience of it is probably colored by Jean-Pierre Jeunet's movie about the fabulous Amélie Poulain. Paris might be flavored by your interest in the existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, or Albert Camus, or by luminary writers like Ernest Hemingway, or any of the other great artists who have loved or hated Paris. On journeys in the outer geographies, one first and foremost meets oneself. On journeys in the outer geographies, one first and foremost meets oneself. Rare is the showman who does not travel in the outer geography. Travel is a valuable part of a showman's education, and for the way they make a living. See the world, learn about the world, experience its endless places, peoples, and peculiarities. The things you learn and participate in on your journeyman existence in the outer world, it teaches you about yourself. In the myriads of meetings and encounters with the new, the exotic, the different, the world and the people in it, you will eventually spot yourself. You might discover yourself like the stone in a river where the water of new experiences, different ways and customs washes past you. Along the way you can ponder and become aware that you in reality aren't like a rock at all. You are permeable. As the river of the outer world washes past you, can let the parts of you which, upon reflection and experience, don't seem essential, they just wash away. You can also replace and alter parts of yourself, import customs and attitudes from the outer world to improve on your own inner geography. Changes or movements in the two geographies impacts on each other. Our reactions to experiences in the outer geography impacts on our inner geography and vice versa. It's my experience that being in an unfamiliar country or culture makes me stand out more to myself, as if the foreign surroundings no longer fully backs up my experience of myself in the way it does in my own house. My house with my things and my art on the walls is in concordance with my experience of myself. At home, my surroundings makes me make sense. It backs up the story I tell myself about myself and the world. In this way, journeys in the outer world stimulates new perspectives on my inner geography and who I am. My map of my inner geography is strongly correlated with my experience and understanding of myself. And for me, this is epitomized in the experience of being on a gig in some country or other, sitting in a hotel room waiting for showtime. In hotels or motels, if you sit at your desk, there's usually a mirror right there. I don't know how many times I've been sitting like that, writing in a notebook or on my computer with the probing eyes in the mirror, my own, querying me, urging me to reflect upon myself. On these journeys, a craft diary is indispensable. That's a notebook where you keep track of transmissions from your inner geography as well as what's going on in the outer geography as it correlates to your work as an artist. That's what I think of as a craft diary. It's just a notebook. Notes from these travels can be valuable. Experiences in these new places might forever become part of your creative output. Dislocated from the familiar, one often has more time to think and reflect. It usually means you have less responsibilities, time is freer and more abundant and more acute. Great discoveries can be made in this altered experience of time that you have in these other places. With room to think, Emptiness and openness, the things one jot down might become permanent marks and topographical discoveries on our interior maps. Faced with yourself in another culture, you face your own culture and yourself in a new way. As you face others, you also face yourself. Remember this from the manifesto? What you took for granted and given is all of a sudden considered alien and foreign to all but you. You find yourself that you have become the other, the stranger. In this meeting with the new outer geography, you can often get glimpses of expanses of your inner geography which had until then remained invisible to you. You did not discover these topographies of you or your inner geography because you simply could not distinguish it as anything. It's not separate. It's very difficult to separate things out. It's not a goal to separate one thing from another, of course, but because nothing is actually separate. It's all in relation to other things. As you become aware of parts of your inner geography you might dislike, or which you upon reflection see as wrongful or hateful or ignorant or narrow-minded, you can take a stand. You can form an opinion on them and decide whether they are places in your inner geography that you actually value. Are they really you? Once discovered, you can take a choice. Will this part of your inner landscape remain, or is it important? Or was it important to have you just discovered it and it is actually obscure? Or will you, now that you clearly can see this thing, move on so that that place on the map of your inner geography, it was there and it existed, but you can decide whether it will be central or whether you will relegate it to the distant periphery, or to the outer rim, to use George Lucas's mythology from Star Wars. With the right kind of work, you can rework parts of the landscape. It's valuable to remember that just like you can pack up your things and move house, move town or move country in the outer geography, you can also move house or town in your inner geography. The unfamiliar terrain might give you experiences which first crystallizes in this time-space of in-between. But once you've had the thought or feeling, it remains a part of you, like you have just expanded your concept of yourself. Ideas and feelings which might inform on who you are as a person has grown. You have become part of a larger conversation or a greater whole. As we journey in the two geographies, we invariably will encounter experiences which necessitates us taking another look at what we thought the whole of ourselves to be. In light of our new perspectives, we need to grow our idea of ourselves. Again and again, the wholeness of existence must be re-established, so that a new, wider and more complex wholeness can be understood. We're all in constant conversation with ourselves, the world and our relation to it. As we grow, the conversation we engage in must expand accordingly. When a place in the world or a person in the world or a community seems so significant it is noted down in permanent ink on both your maps, you have discovered a course point in seeking out your way. As we explore the two geographies, we can, by consciously overlaying and combining our two maps, begin to see where they compellingly come together. We'll end today's leg of this journey with a little snippet from my journeyman days. Being out as a young man, I had a real desire to travel. I wanted out. It was not so much that I wanted to leave the place I was. I was not driven by an eagerness to leave home, but I was fueled by a passion to go out into the world. I wasn't unhappy where I was, but I wanted to see and experience more. There are things I did then that I would never do now. such is life. And it is good to look back and realize that I have developed as a human being. In 1995, I had a ticket to go to the Roskilde Festival in Denmark. It's a huge music festival, which also had a small circus and performance component. And at this stage of my life, I was still a while away from really hitting my stride as an independent showman. I had done my first street shows, and I had done shows with my dad, but I didn't have a strong, worked-out show to tour with. But I was intrigued by the showman's craft and life beyond what I could properly express to myself or anyone else. I felt this solid attraction to meeting the world from a stage. I was drawn to people who practiced the skills of circus and showmanship, and I was drawn to places where I found these kinds of people. So when I was going to the festival, I booked my plane ticket to Copenhagen 2 days early, and I had no money or plans, beyond the fact that I wanted to go to the famous pedestrian street, Strøget, it's a walking street there, where I was certain I could find some street performers, or if not, I would just keep my eyes out for people who looked like showfolk. And at that time, I was very much a juggler, so I was just looking for people with juggling clubs sticking out of their bags or anything. And this idea, it seems so completely foreign and ridiculous to me today. Even as I tell you this, it fills me with dread. I'd never just travel to a city where I knew no one and just walk aimlessly about looking for people or performers to hang out with. Yet, at some point, this was me. This was where I was at. And I also want to stress here that I was not looking for a flirtation or a fling. I went to find people who shared the passions I had for showmanship. So, the one who seeks shall find, and for he who knocks, the gate shall be opened. And I met a bunch of people like this, and I juggled, and I chatted, and this was on that specific trip to Denmark I'm talking about here. And eventually I met this guy who invited me to come and stay at his place, and that night I went out and watched a movie at the cinema with him and his girlfriend. And this stuff, I just cringe just thinking about it now. How much I've changed, and how far I have moved in my inner geography. Yet, I guess, I'm still somehow in the same country. I'm in the country or in the town of showbiz, but I've moved houses many times. These were my journeyman days. I was seeking destinations and experiences to add to the knowledge of my 2 geographies. I did things for the next few decades that I truly loved and who are still part of my life now. I also did things, explored avenues which now are merely part of my history. There are places in my dual geographic explorations of myself and the world, and ultimately, even the ones that seemingly amounted to nothing were just as important in the explorations and discoveries of my geographies and the creations of their respective maps. Our maturation as human beings and as artists and showfolk depends on us expanding our maps with layers in all directions. This is the only way we can become deep, wise, and rounded persons. The expansion and coming together of the 2 maps is a picture of my growing understanding and expansion of the world and myself, my relation to these 2. By knowing myself and the limitations to my knowledge and my blind spots, struggle to find them, be they cultural or biological, I can gain tools and strategies to reliably see through deception. And this is as close to a path of wisdom as I can picture. And with that, our leg of the journey along the way of the showman comes to an end. It's been a pleasure walking with you, and I hope some of these sights and further explorations of the 2 geographies has triggered some resonance in you. Each week when we get back here, we will look at expanding these ideas, and it builds up and becomes more about shows and stuff more specific on some days, and some days it will be more philosophical. Sometimes it might be more emotional or poetic. Sometimes it's autobiographical, where I'm just telling some details from my own life that might add up to some interesting stuff. Anyway, these are the early days along the way. These sites will be revisited in many shapes and forms as we go along. Well, I for one am really enjoying these meetups that we're having, and for those of you who have wanted to offer some support, well, I am at least really enjoying these meetups that we're having, and I'm sure if you had seen me in the flesh now, and this was a conversation we've had together, then you might consider buying me a coffee. So, on that note, curiously, I have managed to sign up through some help with a website called buymeacoffee.com/Captain Frodo. And if you go there, you can, with a simple few clicks of a button, offer a donation. If you think this was valuable to you and you're in a situation where you do have $5, then that would be very much appreciated. And if you don't have money because of your situation, then this announcement is not for you. It's more than enough that you are here with me. Thanks. So, in closing, I'd just like to say again that you can contact me on theWayOfTheShowman@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook on Captain Frodo or Frodo Santini. I'd be happy to hear about any projects that you're working on. I am available to work with you on projects that you might have, acts, shows, or general questions you might have on living the life of a showman, performer, or artist. It's been a pleasure going on this little journey with you, and until next time, all that's left to be said is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.